Ryo looked directly at the young warrior, speaking with a weight that seemed to transcend the room, inviting him, and anyone listening, to subscribe to this path, to train with warriors across time who have chosen stillness over rage, and to recognize that they do not walk alone. He assured the student that the dojo is filled with the spirits of every master who killed their demon, from Musashi to the Stoics, and that the community of those who subscribe to this discipline walks together. Ryo handed the boy a bakken, urging him to let the teachings reach him every week and to practice with purpose, reminding him that the warrior with no anger left to provoke is the one to fear most. As they began the training, Ryo reflected on his journey, knowing that the demon tries to live in everyone, but those who recognize it can kill it, becoming truly dangerous not through violence, but through the unshakable calm of the immovable mind. The warrior's way is simple, yet infinitely difficult. Anger is a puppet string, and you are the toy until you choose to cut the strings, kill the demon, and master yourself. The path of Fudoshin is open to those brave enough to walk it, to bury the rage that ruins relationships and weakens the soul, and to stand amidst the chaos of life with eyes that are calm and a mind that is immovable. This is the legacy of Musashi, the lesson of the blade, and the ultimate victory of the human spirit. Walk with presence, kill your anger, and become immovable, for the warrior who cannot be provoked cannot be defeated. 3 years later, Ryo sat in the dojo as a teacher, facing a hot-headed young warrior who reminded him of his former self, explaining that he still felt anger but simply didn't obey it, using the metaphor of the puppet strings to teach the boy that the moment you realize someone is pulling your strings, you can cut them. He explained that real strength isn't how hard you hit, but how impossible you are to provoke, dismantling the boy's belief that anger provides power by revealing it actually degrades technique and strategy. Ryo taught the final truth, that anger comes from entitlement and the desire to control the world, and that by killing the ego and expecting nothing, as Musashi did, one becomes untouchable. He led the young warrior to the training ground, gesturing to the students and explaining that this battle is fought by warriors throughout history, a discipline kept alive today at presence and purpose, where ancient psychology meets modern application. Ryo returned from the mountain transformed, only to face the ultimate test when news arrived that his younger brother, Kenji, had been murdered by bandits in a senseless, drunken dispute, a tragedy that instantly reignited the volcanic rage Ryo thought he had extinguished. Every fiber of his being screamed for revenge, his vision narrowed, and the demon roared back to life as he demanded Takeda-sensei's permission to kill them all, but the master refused, warning that acting from rage would mean the demon wins and everything he learned would be meaningless. Takeda challenged Ryo to find stillness even in this nightmare, to access Fudoshin not in a duel but in genuine tragedy, instructing him to spend 1 week doing nothing but meditating, feeling the rage and pain fully without obeying it. It was the hardest week of Ryo's life, battling the stories of revenge his mind created. But slowly he realized that revenge was an act of ego that would not bring Kenji back, and by day 7, he chose not to pursue the bandits, understanding that justice from stillness is honor, while revenge from anger is weakness, finally defeating the demon completely. To deepen this mastery, Takeda-sensei sent Ryo to the mountain temple of Ragon to train with Master Hakuin, a regimen of extreme monotony and silence designed to kill anger at the root, involving waking at 3 a.m. for cold water purification, hours of meditation, physical labor, and silence. The first week was mental torture, as Ryo's mind screamed for stimulation and created anger out of boredom. But Master Hakuin explained that anger lives in the mind's inability to be still and accept discomfort, teaching that zazen makes the mind like a still pond where clarity resides. By the 3rd week, Ryo experienced a moment of total presence where his mind quieted completely, understanding that Fudoshin was about becoming so still internally that anger couldn't even arise, a state he then had to learn to access during voluntary provocation, where monks deliberately disrupted his life, until he became unmoved like stone. During a profound meditation on the death koan, asking if you're already dead, what can anger you? Ryo felt a connection to warriors across time, realizing that the path of killing anger is a shared discipline kept alive by communities like presence and purpose, understanding that he was subscribing to a lineage of discipline that required constant practice. 3 months into this transformation, a wandering ronin named Katsu, known for his skill and vicious temper, challenged the dojo, and Takeda-sensei selected Ryo to represent them, a test that triggered Ryo's old instincts of fear and the urge to prove himself until he centered his mind. The next morning, amidst a crowd of students and villagers, Katsu arrived with theatrical swagger and insults, mocking Ryo as a boy, but the new Ryo just watched, observed, and calculated, refusing to engage with the disrespect. When the fight began, Katsu attacked with aggression and speed, trying to overwhelm, but Ryo moved fluidly, redirecting and never being where Katsu expected, driving the ronin to frustration and screams of "Fight me, coward." Ryo remained silent until Katsu, blinded by rage at the lack of reaction, overcommit to a strike and left himself exposed, allowing Ryo to place his bakken at Katsu's throat for a light, controlled victory that shocked the crowd and the ronin himself. Katsu, beaten not by technique but by emotional control, asked how it was possible, to which Ryo replied that he felt the anger but chose not to obey it, marking his achievement of the first level of Fudoshin, mastery over emotion rather than the elimination of it. The psychological reconstruction continued with death meditation, where every morning Ryo was instructed to visualize his own death, to accept it, and to make it his companion. For a man who isn't afraid to die cannot be rattled by anything less, a practice echoed by Musashi, who wrote to think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world. At first, imagining his own cold, ended body was terrifying, but after weeks, death became neutral and natural, making insults and provocations seem ridiculously small in comparison, allowing Ryo to finally face his old opponent and observe the anger rising like a passing cloud without obeying it, moving like water to win in under 2 minutes. Takeda-sensei then gathered the students to explain the neuroscience of anger, detailing how the amygdala hijacks the brain, shifting blood flow away from the prefrontal cortex and literally making the angry man stupider and predictable, contrasting this with Musashi, whose prefrontal cortex stayed in control while his opponent screamed, allowing him to see opportunities they couldn't. This session underscored the Stoic foundation that anger is always a choice, and that the mind is like a blade that dulls with rust but cuts through anything when kept still and sharp, requiring the death of the ego, which is merely weakness disguised as importance. The training of the void began with the dismantling of entitlement, as Takeda-sensei forced Ryo to understand that his anger stemmed from the belief that he deserved respect, that the world owed him fairness, and that people should behave the way he wanted, a form of attachment that is the root of suffering. Musashi trained himself to expect nothing, sleeping in dirt, and training his soul to be untouchable by removing comfort and the illusion of control. So Ryo was subjected to voluntary hardship, sleeping outside in the cold without blankets and eating only rice, a brutal regimen that made his body scream and his mind create 1,000 justifications for quitting until he realized that his anger was merely entitlement in disguise. This evolved into no-reaction training, where other students were instructed to insult, mock, and disrespect Ryo, whose job was to observe without defending or explaining, a practice that taught him that silence shifts the power instantly, leaving the provoker with no leverage, eventually allowing Ryo to stand completely still while his honor and family were insulted, feeling nothing because he chose not to be moved, stripping the words of their power. Takeda-sensei led Ryo to a small meditation room to explain the principle, telling him the stories of Musashi, who won not because of physical superiority, but because he was emotionless in battle, remaining calm, cold, and calculating like death itself while his opponents raged and panicked, a strategy rooted in the understanding that anger is a puppet string. The master invoked the wisdom of Marcus Aurelius, a warrior emperor far from Japan, who noted that it is not external things that trouble us, but our own judgment of them, revealing the hard truth that if someone can make you angry, they can make you do anything, transforming you into a puppet manipulated by emotional strings. Musashi cut those strings by training himself to become immune to provocation, understanding that you don't stop feeling anger, but you stop being controlled by it, realizing that real strength isn't how hard you hit, but how impossible you are to provoke. For a man with no emotional triggers is a man you can't manipulate, threaten, or break. Takeda-sensei looked at Ryo with unusual intensity, explaining that this path to kill anger and master the immovable mind is not solitary, but one walked by warriors throughout history who faced the same demon, a path taught at presence and purpose, where ancient practices meet warrior psychology, inviting Ryo to subscribe to this training and walk with those who have chosen to kill the demon, proving that the dojo of the immovable mind is always open and its students become unstoppable not through violence, but through unshakable calm. There is a demon living inside you, not the cartoonish red creature with horns that you see in folklore, but something far worse, something human, something terrifyingly familiar. It is the anger you feed, the rage that simmers in your gut when someone disrespects you, the burning in your chest when things don't go your way, the part of you that explodes, ruins relationships, makes you weak, and yet you keep feeding it, unaware that there's a way to kill it, to bury it, to walk through fire, with calm eyes while everyone else is screaming. Miyamoto Musashi, arguably the most dangerous man to ever walk Japan, did exactly that, fighting over 60 life-or-death duels and never losing a single one. Not because he was the fastest or the strongest, but because he was emotionless in battle, having killed the anger within him to become a legend. And the question isn't whether you get angry, but whether you will control it or let it control you. A lesson that begins with the awakening of a warrior consumed by rage in Edo, Japan, in the year 1645. Ryo knelt in the dojo, fists clenched, jaw tight, his entire body trembling because he had lost again, the third time this week in sparring, and each time the same problem destroyed him. Anger for when his opponent landed the first strike. Ryo saw red, his technique disappeared, his strategy vanished, and he swung wildly, trying to hurt, trying to punish, trying to make them pay for daring to hit him, leading to his domination by the demon inside him until his master, Takeda-sensei, stood over him and demanded the truth of his failure, forcing Ryo to admit that anger made him weak, a chain and a leash that makes men easy to kill, pointing him toward the concept of Fudoshin, the immovable mind, the state where a warrior remains calm regardless of circumstances, unmoved by provocation, and unshaken by chaos, a state Ryo had to master if he ever wanted to stop losing everything.